When Grandpa gave me his car, my brother demanded it for college, and my parents told me to understand and stop causing problems. I said no. Then I came home one day and found the car gone. So I, 22 male, have been living in my brother's shadow my entire life. My little brother, 20 male James, has always been treated like he's God's gift to humanity, while I'm basically just the invisible kid nobody gives a crap about. It's been this way since we were kids. I still remember this one time in 8th grade when I won first place in the district science fair, spent weeks building this kick-ass solar-powered water filtration system. When I came home with the blue ribbon, my mom just said, "That's nice, dear," and went right back to helping James make a poster for his social studies project that was due the next day. He got a C+ on it, and they took him for ice cream to celebrate his hard work. Christmas was always a complete joke in our house. James's pile of presents would be stacked to the ceiling, all the latest gaming crap, best clothes, whatever he'd been whining about for the past 6 months. My pile, whatever cheap, maybe a flannel shirt, if I was lucky, and occasionally something actually useful for my projects. Practical gifts, Mom would say with this smug look like she deserved a medal for buying me work gloves while James got a freaking Nintendo. Dad was always out in the backyard with James teaching him to throw a football or building his science projects. I'd be in the garage alone watching YouTube videos to learn how to fix stuff because nobody had time to show me. Whenever I asked Dad for help, it was always in a minute that somehow stretched into years. Eventually, I stopped asking. The golden child BS went way beyond gifts and attention. James would literally wreck Mom's car, and they'd just shrug it off. Accidents happen, honey. I'd come home 5 minutes past curfew after working a late shift at the hardware store and get grounded for 2 weeks. Different planet, different rules when you're the favorite. When we were 16 and 14, James went through this phase where he'd borrow my stuff without asking. One time he took my iPod to school, back when those were a thing, and some kid stole it from his backpack. When I got pissed, my parents told me I needed to be more understanding because he's going through a lot. Right now the lot being that he didn't make first string on the JV basketball team. They never replaced it, but 2 weeks later, James had a brand new one because he needs music for his workouts. I figured out pretty early that nobody in our house had my back except me, so I shut up, kept my head down, and worked my ass off. Got my first job washing dishes at this greasy spoon diner, saved every penny, started learning trades from YouTube and the old guys at the hardware store where I eventually got hired. Didn't need their validation anyway. My parents had this blind spot that was exactly my size and shape. They'd remember to buy James's favorite cereal, but forget I was allergic to peanuts. They'd drive 4 hours to see James's regional baseball game, but couldn't be bothered to attend my high school graduation because it was such a long ceremony and parking would be a nightmare. It sounds like I'm making this crap up, but I swear I'm not. It's like living in some kind of twisted sitcom where I'm the side character nobody remembers the, "Oh yeah, there's another kid too." Son. The thing is, James was just as bad as my parents in his own way, entitled, selfish, smug about his golden child status. He'd rub it in my face constantly. Mom said yes to me, but she'd probably say no to you. He'd smirk when I was a kid. Or he'd accidentally break my stuff and then act all innocent when I got mad. By the time we were in high school, I'd pretty much accepted my place in the family hierarchy. Keep expectations low and you don't get disappointed. So I focused on stuff I could control: my grades, my jobs, my friends, my projects. So here's where my grandpa, 72 male, comes into the story. Grandpa Joe was the only one who ever really saw me. Ironically, he was my dad's father, former Marine and old-school mechanic, who could strip an engine blindfolded if he had to. The man was a legend with his hands. While my parents were busy cheering at James's soccer games or obsessing over his school plays, I'd be at Grandpa's garage learning how to change oil, replace spark plugs, and eventually rebuild carburetors. Those were the days I actually felt like someone gave a damn about me. "You got something special in those hands, boy," he'd tell me while we worked side by side on whatever beater he was fixing up. "Your dad never had the patience for this stuff, always too busy chasing the next promotion, the next big thing." He'd shake his head like he couldn't quite figure out where he went wrong with his son. Grandpa saw right through my parents' favoritism BS. This one time when I was 15, my parents forgot my birthday, like completely forgot. They remembered the day before that James had a swimming competition the next day and the whole family had to go. My mom actually said, "Oh, it's your birthday tomorrow, isn't it? We'll celebrate next weekend." They didn't even get me a cake. When Grandpa found out, he was pissed. Showed up at our house that night with a toolbox wrapped in newspaper. Inside was this beautiful set of precision screwdrivers I'd been eyeing for months. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he said loud enough for my parents to hear from the kitchen. Well, some are worth celebrating properly. Every Christmas when I'd open those practical gifts from my parents' socks, school supplies, whatever, Grandpa would sneak me something real quality tools, mostly stuff I still use today. One year, my parents actually complained about it. My mom had the nerve to say, "He doesn't need to be spoiled, Joe," like a decent set was equivalent to the new iPhone James had just unwrapped. Grandpa just stared her down like she was an idiot. Recognizing talent ain't spoiling, it's investing. Then he winked at me. When I was 18, Grandpa got diagnosed with Parkinson's. Bad news, obviously. He couldn't drive anymore, so he called me up one weekend, told me he had something for me. Said it might not be pretty, but it had good bones. That was one of his favorite expressions. I drove over to his place, thinking maybe he was giving me some of his old tools or something. Instead, there was this 1967 Mustang Fastback sitting in his driveway, faded Highland green with more rust than paint-torn seats, and an engine that made sounds I didn't know a car could make. But holy hell, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Grandpa handed me the keys and told me he'd been saving it for me since I was 12. Said he'd watched how my parents treated me all those years and figured I deserved something that was just mine. He'd planned to restore it himself, but his hands weren't working right anymore with the Parkinson's starting to take hold. "Your dad never appreciated muscle cars," he said, running his hand over the rusted hood. "But you'll bring her back to life." I'm not going to lie, I had to turn away for a minute, got something in my eye or whatever. When I drove that rust bucket home, my parents actually laughed at it when they saw it in the driveway. Dad didn't even look up from his phone when I told him about it, just said, "Don't waste money on that death trap." My father was too obsessed with this pile of junk. Pile of junk. Nah, now I see what Grandpa was trying to tell me. Mom just complained about the oil stains on the concrete. James, though, his eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning when he saw it. Wow, that's going to be so badass when it's fixed up. Though Grandpa never showed it to me, he said, and for once I felt like I had something he envied, something he couldn't just get by whining to our parents about it. For 1 year, I spent every spare minute on that car. Every paycheck went straight to parts, after rent and food. Learned to weld, taught myself how to rebuild the engine by watching endless YouTube videos and reading forums. My hands were permanently stained with grease fingernails, never completely clean, arms covered in little burns and cuts. My room was stacked with Chilton manuals and printouts of wiring diagrams. I'd fall asleep thinking about valve timing and wake up planning bodywork. When things got bad at home, which was always I'd escape to the garage and lose myself in the restoration. There's something almost meditative about working on cars. When you get in the zone, it's just you and the machine. Everything else fades away. I scrounged parts from junkyards, swap meets online forums, rebuilt the 390 V8 myself piece by piece, sanded the body down to bare metal, and painstakingly fixed the rust spots, learning to weld and shape metal as I went. Did the paint job in my buddy's uncle's shop after hours, traded labor for booth time. Reupholstered the interior, the whole thing. The day I finally got that engine running right, hearing that deep rumble of the V8 coming to life, man, it was like everything I'd worked for finally paying off. The Highland green paint gleamed in the sun. Yes, I went with the bullet color Sumi. The black leather interior smelled like a new start. And when I took her for that first real drive, windows down, engine growling for once in my life, I had something that was truly mine, something I'd built with my own 2 hands that nobody could take credit for. She was my achievement, the thing nobody could take away from me. See, the thing about growing up as the ignored kid is you get used to people not really wanting your stuff. Nobody was fighting to borrow my clothes or play with my games because in their eyes, James always had the better version anyway. So I wasn't prepared for what happened when for once in my life I had something that was actually worth envying. And man, did James envy that Mustang. So after I got the Mustang running properly, James couldn't stop talking about it. Every single time I drove it, he'd be at the window watching like a kid staring at an ice cream truck. Whenever I'd pull in, he'd come racing out to the garage. "Can I sit in it just for a minute?" At first, I didn't mind that much. It was actually kind of nice having someone appreciate all the work I'd put in. My parents sure as hell didn't care. Dad just complained about tools taking up space in the garage, And Mom kept making these passive-aggressive comments about wasting money instead of saving for a real future, whatever the hell that meant. But then James's requests started getting more annoying. It went from, "Can I sit in it?" to, "Can I drive it to prom? Just for one night, I'll be super careful." Then it was, "Let me take it to the beach this weekend. My friend would freak if I picked him up in this." Always with that entitlement in his voice, like of course I'd say yes because that's what everyone always did with James. I always said no, not because I wanted to be a jerk to my brother. I said no because I knew James. This is the kid who broke 3 phones in 1 year. The kid who borrowed Dad's expensive golf clubs for a single afternoon and somehow lost half the set. The kid who never took care of anything because he never had to. Something always got replaced when he broke it. He didn't have to be responsible for anything because of course my parents had his back. And you think I'm crazy to let him take my painstakingly restored classic Mustang after watching that track record his whole life? Hell no. The tension kept piling up. James would roll his eyes whenever I refused, saying stuff like, "It's just a car, dude, you're so freaking uptight. Just a car. Just a car," like I hadn't spent an entire year every spare dollar rebuilding the damn thing. Then my parents started making these little comments at dinner stuff like, "You know, sharing is part of being a good brother, and that car just sits in the garage most of the time anyway." Classic setup in our house. What James wants, James gets. Except this time, I wasn't budging. My dad tried to guilt trip me one night. "You know, when I was your age, I always shared with my brothers. That's what family does." I almost laughed in his face. This from the guy who literally hid the good snacks in his office so he wouldn't have to share with his kids. I just replied, "When you were my age, did you rebuild a classic car from scratch with money you earned working your ass off while going to college?" That shut him up for about 5 minutes. My mom tried a different angle. She cornered me in the kitchen one morning with her coffee cup and that fake, concerned look she gets. "Honey, I'm worried about you getting so attached to material things. It's just metal and rubber, you know. Relationships are what matter in life." Funny how they care about maintaining a good relationship when it comes to James. Things came to a head when James got accepted to State University. My parents threw this massive party, invited everyone they knew. I mean, yeah, good for him, but it's not like State is Harvard. It's a decent school with a 70% acceptance rate that he barely got into with his mediocre grades and Dad's alumni connection, but whatever. I showed up and still congratulated him. During dinner, Dad stood up and announced they had a surprise for James. Dad started talking about how James would need transportation for campus, which was about 40 minutes from home, and looked right at me saying they thought I should let James use the Mustang while he was at school. The entire table turned to look at me, expecting me to just smile and play along like always. Like I was going to say, "Sure, take the car. I spent 1 year rebuilding the one possession I have that actually means something to me, no problem at all." I just said, "No, that's not happening." 3 simple words. You'd think I'd suggested we sacrifice the family dog from the way they all reacted. Dead silence at the table. Dad tried to smooth it over by saying we'd discuss it later, but I shut that down too. Told him there was nothing to discuss. It was my car, end of story. Mom jumped in saying I shouldn't be selfish because James needed reliable transportation for this important time in his life. Like college is somehow more important than I don't know my entire existence maybe. I told them to buy him a car like they bought him everything else he ever wanted. That's when Dad got pissed, slammed his hand on the table, nearly knocking over the gravy boat, and said I was being ridiculous over just a car. I stood up and finally let out what I'd been holding in for years. I told him it was my car, that I rebuilt myself, that I had the title for, that I paid for with my money, and I wasn't giving it to James just because he wanted it. Told them for once in their lives to tell their precious golden child no. Said maybe James could learn what it's like to actually work for something instead of having it handed to him on a silver platter. Mom looked at me like she couldn't believe I was actually standing up for myself. Dad looked like he was going to burst a blood vessel. James just sat there with that frown, probably pissed that his usual want wine get process was hitting a roadblock. I walked out before anyone could say anything else. Next morning, Dad tried again. He tried a different way this time. "Listen, son," he said like we were negotiating a contract. "I understand you've put a lot of work into that car. What if we compensate you for it? We could put some money toward another project car for you, something you could work on while James takes the Mustang. He needs it now." I just laughed. "You don't get it, do you? It's not about the money. I don't want another project car. I want my car that I already rebuilt. And don't start again with the, "it's just a car," because it's not. It means to me way more than that. Then he tried the being selfish again. James has an opportunity here. This could really set him up for success. Don't you want what's best for your brother? I was so tired of that line. What about what's best for me, Dad? Has that ever crossed your mind even once? The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. It genuinely hadn't. For the next couple weeks, things were tense at home. My mom tried the silent treatment like I was the one being unreasonable. My dad kept making these little digs about team players and family sacrifice. James alternated between sulking and trying to butter me up with sudden brotherly interest in my life. I just kept my head down and focused on my classes and work, spent as little time at home as possible, started seriously looking into getting my own place even though rent in our area was ridiculous. But I started planning. I figured they'd eventually get over it and buy James a car like normal parents would, a car they could afford. But nope, they just didn't want to, because why spend money when they could take my car for free? Then, after 1 week, I got a call from my aunt in Michigan. Grandpa Joe's health had taken a serious nosedive. The Parkinson's was getting worse, and during a routine checkup, doctors found some other issues. They were concerned about heart stuff, apparently. I was panicking, immediately planned to drive up to Michigan to see him. It was about a 6-hour drive, and I figured I'd stay for a long weekend. I told my parents I was going, even though we were barely speaking after the dinner fight. Mom just nodded and said to give Grandpa their love. Dad grunted something about me missing work, classic. I was angry they barely gave a crap about Grandpa. My buddy Dean, who always loved my grandpa's stories, knew about the trip. He got sad for him and offered to drive with me. Been wanting to visit this legendary man, he said. I thought about taking the Mustang, but Michigan roads in early spring are absolute hell, potholes the size of kiddie pools from the winter freeze-thaw cycles. Didn't want to risk damage to the freshly restored undercarriage. Plus, Dean's truck had better heat and Michigan was still freezing in April, so we took it instead. When we got to Michigan, my entire mood changed. Grandpa was in rough shape. Seeing this tough old Marine who used to carry me on his shoulders now barely able to hold a coffee cup, it really messed me up. His body was failing him, but his mind was still sharp as ever. "Took your sweet time getting here," he grumbled when we walked in, then winked to let me know he was kidding. We sat with him and he started telling war stories and tales from the past, and Dean was eating it up. It was good to see Grandpa happy again, even if just for a bit. Dean had to head back after the first weekend for work, but I decided to stay longer. Grandpa's condition was worse than I'd expected, and I wanted to be there. I slept on a cot in his room at the assisted living place, helped him move, and made sure he ate properly. We had some good talks during those 2 weeks. He asked about the Mustang, of course. I showed him pictures of the finished restoration on my phone, and his eyes lit up. "Damn, boy, you did good. Real good job. I'm proud of you, kiddo." Then he asked about my parents and James. Saw right through my vague answers. "They giving you crap about that car, aren't they?" I nodded, told him about James wanting it for college and the big fight. Grandpa just shook his head. "Your dad never did understand the value of working with your hands. Always wanted the easy way." Then he looked me dead in the eye. "Don't you give in, you hear me? That car is yours. You built it. You keep it." I promised him I would. After almost 2 weeks, Grandpa finally stabilized enough that I felt okay about heading home. The nurse had a good routine with him, and my aunt was checking in daily. I caught the Greyhound bus back. It was a long, uncomfortable ride, and I was exhausted by the time I got to our town's bus station. Called an Uber to take me home since nobody in my family bothered to offer a ride, even though I texted my ETA. When I pulled into our driveway, something felt off immediately. The Mustang wasn't in the garage where I'd left it. I figured maybe my dad had moved it to work on his own project car, so I checked the street parking, the side yard, everywhere. Nothing. I stormed inside and found my mom in the kitchen. "Where's my car?" I demanded. She jumped like she was surprised to see me and immediately tried changing the subject. "Oh, you're back. How's your grandfather?" "Where's my Mustang?" I repeated, not letting her deflect. She wouldn't meet my eyes, suddenly very interested in the dish she was drying. "James took it to campus. He needed a car for school, and since you were gone." My blood went cold. "He took my car to campus after I said no to all of you. Are you serious?" Dad walked in then, and I could tell from his face he knew exactly what was happening now. "Now listen. He started using his courtroom voice. "We tried to call you, but reception was spotty up there." "Bullshit," I shot back. "I had a signal the whole time. I texted you guys every day with updates about Grandpa. You didn't call because you knew what I'd say." Dad went on, "Look, what's done is done. James needs that car more than you do right now. And what am I doing just existing? That's my car. I'm going to campus right now to get it." "That might be difficult," Dad said. "The title's been transferred legally. It's James's car now." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "You did what?" I swear my brain took a screenshot. The way he said it was as if he was talking about the weather. It just makes more sense for him to have it right. "You transferred my title. How the hell did you do that without my signature?" They exchanged this look that told me everything I needed to know. "Well, about that, we forged your signature." "Are you freaking kidding me? That's illegal." "Don't be so dramatic," Mom snapped, finally dropping the sweet act. "We are your parents. We were just making the right decision." I pulled out my phone and started dialing. "Who are you calling?" Mom asked, suddenly nervous. "The police." Dad lunged forward and grabbed my phone. "Don't be stupid, you'll regret it." I looked at them, already boiling. "Yeah, someone's going to regret this, but it won't be me." I grabbed my phone back and walked out. Called Dean and he came straight to pick me up. "Dude, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I told him everything. "What the actual hell?" was all Dean could say at first. Thought odd. I crashed on his couch that night, too angry to even think about going back home. Kept picturing James driving my car around campus, showing it off like he owned it, imagining my parents thinking they'd gotten away with it. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Dean's dad, Tom, came home late from work. Luckily, he's a lawyer. Dean told him what happened and he sat down with us. He told me that what they did is definitely illegal. Grand theft, auto forgery, fraud, those are all felonies. But he told me that I need to think hard about whether I want to go down this road with my family, because they might face real consequences. But guess what? I had zero fucks to give. Let them face whatever the hell was coming because they deserved it. That night, my phone was blowing up with texts from my parents, all variations of, "Come home so we can talk about this," and "You're overreacting," and "Family comes first." I ignored all of them and slept knowing I was about to give them some lessons. That's when Operation Takedown began. The next day, first stop, the DMV. Most boring place on the planet, but man was it worth the 2-hour wait. I requested records of the title transfer for the Mustang. Sure enough, there it was, my signature on the transfer papers dated exactly when I was sitting in a hospital room in Michigan with Grandpa. Got copies of the original title too, showing the car was legally mine from when Grandpa signed it over. Next, I dug through all my files at home when my parents were at work. I'd always been meticulous about keeping records for the Mustang restoration. I had every receipt, every before and after photo, every piece of evidence showing it was my project from day one. Had the original bill of sale from Grandpa to me. Even had texts from my parents acknowledging it was my car project. Then Tom suggested we get proof I was actually in Michigan when the title transfer happened. This was the genius part. I went to my bank and got ATM camera footage showing me withdrawing cash from a Michigan ATM on the exact day the transfer papers were signed. I was literally 300 miles away from the DMV when my signature somehow appeared on those documents. While all this was happening, my phone was blowing up non-stop. My parents left these desperate voicemails starting with anger. "How dare you not answer our calls?" Complete outrage moving to guilt. "We're so worried about you." And finally settling on manipulation. "If you love your brother, you'll come home and we can sort this out as a family." I didn't respond to any of it. I was done talking. This was way beyond the point where a family meeting could fix things. With all the evidence in hand, Tom and I went to the police station to file reports for grand theft, auto forgery, and fraud. Walking out of that police station was like I'd crossed some line that couldn't be uncrossed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just taking whatever crap my family decided to dish out. I was fighting back. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they do turn. It took almost 3 weeks for them to act on my complaint. 3 weeks of my parents escalating their attempts to contact me. The messages started getting desperate. "Stop being dramatic and come back home immediately," and "You're tearing the family apart for a crappy car," and my personal favorite, "You're making a mountain out of a molehill." A molehill. They stole my car, forged my signature on legal documents, and threatened me when I called them on it. But sure, I was overreacting. I kept myself busy during those weeks, picked up extra shifts at work, helped Dean's dad around their house to thank them for letting me stay, started looking for my own apartment, figuring it was finally time to get completely clear of my family's BS. Then, after almost 3 weeks of silence from the police, the detective called. "We're moving on your case," he said. "Officers are headed to your brother's dorm now to recover the vehicle." My heart was pounding as I hung up. It was actually happening. I'd been half convinced the cops would just shrug it off as a family matter. But when the cops showed up at James's dorm to recover the Mustang, it wasn't there. According to his roommate, James had taken it to a friend's house for safekeeping after getting worried texts from our parents. Because of course he had. That's when things got really serious. What had been a family dispute became a full-blown criminal investigation. The police tracked the car to a storage unit about an hour from campus. The unit was rented under a fake name, but they traced the payment back to my dad's credit card. And there they found my Mustang under a tarp with the VIN plates already removed. The cops said it was clear evidence they were planning to either sell it illegally or make it disappear permanently. Taking off VIN plates is a felony in itself. The next day, James got arrested at his dorm for receiving stolen property and conspiracy. My parents were picked up at work and charged with forgery, fraud, and tampering with evidence. The local paper ran a story, "Family Charged in Classic Car Theft Scheme." There was even a picture of my parents being escorted into the courthouse for their arraignment. My phone basically exploded after that. Relatives I barely knew calling to ask what the hell was happening. High school friends texting to check if the rumors were true. And my parents, now truly desperate, calling hourly with tearful pleas to drop the charges, in their wildest fucking dreams. "This will ruin James's future," Mom sobbed in one voicemail. "He could go to jail. Is that what you want for your brother?" Another from Dad. "You are a total jerk. The legal fees are draining our savings. We might lose the house." I didn't call back. Not once. They'd made their choice when they decided stealing from me was okay. Now they were sucking it up. My extended family was split. Some were horrified at what my parents had done, like my aunt in Michigan. Others took my parents' side, of course. My mom's sister left me this scathing voicemail about how I was destroying the family over a stupid car. I didn't reply. What was the point? Through all this chaos, I was calm. Like I'd finally reached the point where nothing they could say or do would affect me anymore. I'd spent my whole life being the good kid, the reasonable one, the one who sucked it up, and dealt with whatever unfairness came my way. And where had that gotten me? Nowhere. The most surprising call came from James from the county jail. Unlike his usual confident tone, he sounded desperate. He started with some BS about it all being a misunderstanding and claimed he thought I was cool with him having the car because our parents said so. I cut him off right there and told him to stop lying. He knew exactly what he was doing since I told him to his face at that dinner that he was never getting my car. After a pause, he admitted it. Said he figured I wouldn't press charges because family sticks together or some crap like that. He said my dad claimed it wasn't a big deal since they're my parents and that the car was wasted on me anyway since I just worked on it instead of actually driving it somewhere worthwhile. Pure entitled BS, but exactly what I dealt with my whole life. Then he had the nerve to beg me to drop the charges because this was going to mess up his life. I just laughed and welcomed him to the world of consequences, then hung up. As the case moved forward, I got regular updates from the detective. The evidence was overwhelming, he said. Between the forged signature, the ATM footage proving I was out of state, and the fact they'd removed the VIN plates, the prosecutor was confident they had a solid case. "Your parents' attorney has reached out about a plea deal," the detective told me. "They want to make this go away." I bet they did. But this wasn't going away, not this time. Edit 1. God, I didn't expect this to get so much attention. Thank you all. Edit 2. For those asking for an update, I will update you soon about everything. Things are quite messy now, so excuse me until I'm free. So around update. Hey Reddit, it's been about almost a year since my original post blew up, and a lot of you have been messaging me for an update. And let me tell you, there's a lot of things to tell, so buckle up. So the legal system worked slow as hell, but it gets there eventually. Over the next few months, I watched from a distance as my family's perfect image completely fell apart. Turned out the prosecutor wasn't interested in any plea deals. James ended up with a felony conviction for grand theft auto and tampering with evidence. Got sentenced to 8 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and 500 hours of community service. State University expelled him immediately when the conviction came down. No appeals, no second chances. My parents didn't fare much better. Dad got hit with forgery, fraud, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. Mom got the same charges since they proved she was the one who actually forged my signature. They both got 18 months probation, massive fines, and 30 days in county jail, which the judge wouldn't let them serve on weekends like they begged to. Dad lost his accounting job. Turns out firms don't like keeping convicted fraudsters around to handle money. Their perfect reputation completely destroyed. On top of the criminal charges, the civil suit I filed with Tom's help hit them where it hurt. They had to sell their house to cover legal fees and damages. Last I heard, they're living in some crappy apartment and barely making ends meet. They tried to declare bankruptcy to escape the civil judgment, but the court denied it. Through their court-appointed lawyer, they made one last attempt to reach out. Offered to take a second mortgage on the house they were already selling to pay for the car and then some if I just dropped the charges. Said we were still a family and could get past this. I sent back one line through Tom. We stopped being a family when you chose James over me for the last time. The Mustang was eventually recovered from the storage unit. The court ordered it returned to me with damages for the attempted theft and emotional distress. It came back with a dent in the fender and some scratches, but nothing I couldn't fix. While all this legal stuff was happening, I'd been staying with Dean and his family, but I knew I needed a more permanent solution. I didn't just want to move out. I wanted to get away from that toxic environment completely. So I made a decision. I packed up everything I owned, which wasn't much. Amazing how little you need when you start fresh, quit my job, and moved to Michigan to live with Grandpa Joe. His Parkinson's wasn't getting better, and he needed someone around more consistently than my aunt could manage with her job and kids. It was honestly the best decision I've ever made. I transferred my community college credits to a school nearby and picked up a part-time job at a local auto restoration shop where they actually appreciated my skills. The first weekend after I got settled, I drove the Mustang up to see Grandpa. He looked really tired. The sight of him broke my heart. I helped him out to the parking lot so he could see the car properly in the sunlight. He ran his trembling hand along the fender. The smile on his face was precious. He was so happy I moved in with him. Living with Grandpa those few months was the best thing that could have happened for both of us. I'd help him with everything, and even cook his meals while he'd sit at the kitchen table giving me advice about compression ratios and valve timing. We'd watch old westerns together in the evening, him falling asleep halfway through, but insisting I tell him how they ended anyway. My parents tried to visit a few times after Grandpa took a bad turn. He refused to see them. He said he didn't want to see those two hypocrites. Grandpa passed away about 6 months after I moved into his house. Went peacefully in his sleep. I was with him that last night telling him about this '69 Charger the shop had just taken in for restoration. I grieved him. Still do. At the funeral, my family showed up. James looked like hell after his stint in county jail. My parents just looked beaten down and old. I kept my distance even when they tried to talk. Didn't trust myself to say anything that wouldn't turn into a scene, and Grandpa deserved better than that on his final day. After the service, I was shocked to learn that Grandpa had left me everything: his house, his tools, his modest savings. My dad looked like he'd been slapped when the lawyer read the will. Guess he'd been counting on an inheritance to help with their financial problems from the legal mess. The lawyer handed me an envelope afterward, a letter from Grandpa. The letter began with, "To my real son." He wrote that the last months with me were the happiest he'd had in years. He even asked me to keep the Mustang running smooth. I couldn't help it. I cried my eyes out when I read it. I still keep that letter in the glove box of the Mustang now. Still in Michigan, living in Grandpa's house. Got some solid friends, a job I love, and a future that looks pretty bright. Every Sunday when the weather's good, I take the Mustang for a long drive down the coastal roads by the lake we drive on. As for my family, they contacted me many times begging for help. I blocked them every time and told them to go to hell. That door is closed and locked. Edit 1 guys, thanks for all the awards and support. I appreciate your kind words a lot. Edit 2, for those asking if I'll update you guys again, I think I'm going off for a while. I really need to take a long break and just focus on my life. So peace out for now.